Well, here we are at another Alcove installation. It's a big project, this one. So we've got what would normally be triple door cabinets at the bottom, although in this case we're replacing one of the doors with an oak box for log storage, and they both have lighting integrated into them, and also where there are sockets we're going to cut out and remount the faceplates. So I've sheeted out thoroughly. I do take time over this. Means I can work freely and quickly later without worrying about where dust goes. A few things still to take in from the van, including the base units. Sometimes we just clamp them together to stop them moving around in the van. There's the MW1000, which will go in next. And we keep all the job parts in a box. So we've got the drawings, various different detailed drawings, and we've got all the odds and ends, including the lighting. That's the double-sided tape for sticking the lighting strips on. That's what we use. Not sure what's happened with the code there. Feet, etc. Lighting strips. This is the Hayfley Luke system, and this is our preferred profile. They call it a draw profile. Now Brady's already cut them to very precise shelf lengths based on the test assembly in the workshop. Okay, so I'm all set up. Now the next thing is popping off those skirtings. It's not something I normally do, but the customer wants to reuse them to patch in there. After that, I'm going to turn off the downstairs electrics, take these faceplates off, see how much wire we've got to play with, and hopefully then be able to just feed the wire through these cutouts and through back boxes and wire them back in. Now the cutouts are done 135mm by 75mm for the double sockets and 75mm square for the single. And if you have a 20mm void at the back and recess the back for the clips of the back boxes, which we do quickly using a 35mm Forstner bit because it's easy, you do a recess down to leaving about 8 or 10mm material from the front thickness, then these boxes will just go in easily. The clips will have the space to sort of push back and then locate and then pull forward when the screw starts pulling them. I've put the Huopar laser level on the drawer of the MW1000. Just makes quite a good platform that usually ends up being around about central in the room. And it doesn't matter exactly the height it's at, it's just a relative reference point. 735 off the floor to the laser. I checked earlier and it was near 740 in some places. So over here off the floor, just kind of anywhere, but do a couple checks within the space it will sit. So that's 716, something like that. It's in the region of 20mm difference. So that measurement's more, which means that the floor there is lower. Now that's easy to get confused about. So the floor drops down 20mm there. So if I'm going to fit the units level with each other, I'm going to have 2 centimeters more plinth showing on that side. Before we go any further, I'm pre-joining the birch ply base cabinet to the oak box, and they've been designed so that the oak box sticks out forward by about the thickness of the doors. So 22, I'm actually giving it 23mm. So I've lined that up. I've used my Craig Multimark, which I find a very useful tool. You can just set a projection, and so I've set it like that. And I'm screwing where the screws will be hidden by the mounting plate at the front. I will put a couple at the back, but you'll hardly see them in use. And these have been pre-drilled for lighting runs, by the way. The feet then want to be in line, and they'll receive the plinth. So the plinth will be set back. It will run flush to the front of that, and the doors will sit projecting forward from it, and the cover strips will sit flush with the doors. planned this, and I was forgetting this when I talked about it earlier, is we've made the cutouts in the unit a couple of inches lower than the socket on the wall. So we can do this, cut a channel out there, bring that cable down and regain that length as slack coming forward. We've got a couple of issues to resolve, which are not unusual with this kind of job. I've levelled both units so I can just check the relative level. And I've gone to this one and made sure that the gap is never more than 120 millimeters, because I know that I haven't got any more scribing allowance than that. This one is levelled down as much as it can go, so there's no adjustment left on the feet at the back. I know that this is at the max because of the floor being lower. I want it to be at the max. I can just offer my tape measure here, and I've got about 49, 50 millimeters off the laser level. For them to be in line, the measurement needs to be the same, but this is 10 millimeters higher, because if it's a lower measurement, then the unit is higher, it's come up closer to the laser line. So that needs to drop down by 10 millimeters in order for the tops to be in line with each other. I can't drop it down because the feet here are at their minimum adjustment, which means I'm going to have to take it out again and pull those feet out and hacksaw at least 10 millimeters off the back ones that are at the minimum adjustment. I was looking around for a scrap block to be a reference for the height, couldn't find one. Just so happens that the laser lands right on the top edge of that piece of masking tape, that roll of masking tape, so I can use that now as my reference. So there we've got the 10 mil-ish that we've got to go down by, so I can just tweak this leg down, make that my starting reference point, get that to the line, and then there we go. I can just start moving along to all the other legs, put a bit of weight on them as I do the adjustment, and get them down to just landing on that top edge there. That one's got to go up. The other issue I'm hitting upon here is I can't perfectly level the top of this because there's a bit of a skew. Well, I doubt I'll be able to force this squarer, this oak, but I can probably force the front of that a little bit squarer, which I could do by securing these feet. I could just drive a Craig screw through once it's leveled, hold that down, and then jack these up a little bit to force the front up. But I doubt I'll get it all perfectly square. And this is a symptom of us using not the most precise cutting out equipment still until we get the panel saw. Perhaps that's just a cop out and an excuse, but it does happen sometimes. The system though does account for this in that we have that floating scribe, so I can place that scribe to meet the door gaps. It may well be that we have a tapering gap to the top of the door, but with the overhang of the countertop, that's hidden until you come down to this kind of level. And with it not being a classic style unit, just a set back plinth, there'll be no gap at the bottom, no sort of narrow gap to give you a visual reference if there's a bit of a skew there. So this does sometimes happen, but I think if I hadn't said it, when you see the final result, you never would have thought about it. I may though just need to put some packers underneath the countertop to make sure that the counter runs dead straight, because otherwise I'll get a gap at the back of the bookcase unit. So it's all fixable, it just needs a little bit of thought about the best way to get around it. I've made a bit of a mistake. And it's down to, once again, fitting something that's semi-standard, but I've altered it and I've gone into autopilot. So what I've done is I've set this gap at 30 to 36 millimeters because that's the standard. And normally then I have one packer and then this would be my finished cover panel, and that wants to just cover and meet the wall there. So I set it all out, fixed it like that. Forgetting that, I've done it differently. So the outer side of the unit is 18 millimeters in from where it would normally be, because normally the outer side of the unit would be on that line. The door would be hinged on a cranked hinge off it, and this 56mm cover strip would be overlapping the side of the unit. But I've got this double packed side for this style with the oak box. First time we've done this, which means that the finished side is now 18 millimeters further over there. And I should have clocked it, because when I set it out, I was thinking, why is this gap bigger than it normally is? But it was just within the scribing allowance, and I just thought, well, the wall must kick out more at the front than what I originally measured at the back. But over here, somehow I missed it, and this actually ended up wider than the piece that we've got pre-sprayed, even with the 20 millimeters allowance. So what I've been able to do is just take those back screws out, shunt it across before I'd fully fitted this, and get it to the point where I know that cover strip will go on and not be too small. But it does now mean that this is going to be narrower than that, which is not a big deal, but kind of not quite how we designed it. But I only found it out after I'd really committed to the position of that, because that's got screws in the feet, including one there that I can't now get to because that's been glued on now for some time. So I think we're committed now, and I'll just have to make a decision when I put the upper unit on whether I keep the line of that cover strip sort of dead in line, or whether I shift the whole upper unit over so that I have equal side strips. So Josh is with me today, and we've started getting these plinths on here. We're doing one side each. So he's Mr. Makita, I'm Mr. Festal, and plinths on here, and we're getting the doors on next, because that's the order that we do things in. Get doors on, get door gaps right, then fit the scribe to fit the door gap. Now on this one, we've got overlay hinges on the side that's up against the oak box, and we've got inset hinges, which is the usual standard, on the side up against the wall, which means that will leave the door thrown over here, so the cover strip covers that edge there, but the overlay just leaves a gap tight up to the oak box. I'm just setting up to start installing the Luke's lighting system. This is a Hayfully Luke system. The strip light that we use it's called LED 2043-2043, and it's the warm white. The driver we're using, this is the 40 watt one, which is enough for the wattage, the total wattage. We've got a light down there, and then a lot of lights in the shelves running up there. And what I'm going to do whilst I've got the countertop off is mount this and the coils of wires coming off the power source, just mount them up there so they'll be accessible but out of the way. And then we'll have one light cable, which I've started to thread through, going into the oak box, and then another one that will go up to the shelves, and then we'll have a load of lights connected in series, snaking back and forth between the shelves. So what they're all going to have is the light strip in a clip connector like that, self-adhesive backing stuck into this aluminium channel, which is called a draw profile from Hayfully. Again, it's the Luke's system. So I think it's designed for going underneath. Say you had a pull-out drawer, you put it under there, and I think it has quite a wide spread of light, so I think it lights a small space quite well. We just use it because having the wide spread stops you getting these sort of angular shadow lines that you can get coming off it. Once that's clipped down and that's all in, it clips on around and over the edge there. So when you're fitting it up tight to a lip, you need to allow that, if you ever wanted to pop that off, it's got to spread and come out. So you need to leave probably 3 millimeters at least between the edge of that and any surface that it's up tight against. So that's in place. We've got the light strip fitted there. Everything connected with the cables going through to where they'll head up when the top unit goes in as well. The switch, which will be built into a side panel, is a contact switch. We used to use a wave activated one, but I prefer this now. So you have to actually touch it to turn the light off and on, or hold your finger over it to activate a dimming cycle. The wiring we bunch up where there's excess using little cable ties which pass through this self-adhesive holder. That'll peel off, stick on, but you've also got holes so you could put a screw through if you needed to. The driver has a self-adhesive plate as well, but we do normally add screws just to make sure it can't drop off. And then all this wiring will be bunched up in a similar way and made tidy just up out of sight there. So we're just templating in these countertops now. I've talked about different methods of doing this on the channel in the past, but I've come around to the templating method. So we've ripped down a bunch of 6mm strips of MDF. They could be thinner, that's just what we had in stock. And then what I do is I cut them to fit the space. So I cut the one along the back to start with. I've laid it out there. And then I'm cutting ones that fit up against the wall to the side, which means you can place that independently, trim it to the shape, and then glue it in. And we're doing it by gluing blocks on top so that the whole template ends up with a flush bottom. Diagonals where needed, and gluing it with the glue gun, which is quite a quick and easy method. It sets quite fast and it's more than strong enough. And then we've given ourselves some reference points for where that needs to land on the finished board, allowing for 20mm overhang at the side and at the front. So again, over here I marked off that reference point, measured 20mm off where it was sitting in the alcove. Lay it on, double check everything, mark round that, and then we're good to go, and we can cut that and it will fit perfectly. Okay, so we've pre-fitted this contact switch here. We've kept it quite close to the lip there, so it's fairly out of sight, in a position that will be quite comfortable to reach when you want to turn it on. And that's going to project out into the void towards the wall. And the way I secure that now, it's gone through a 12mm hole, and I'm just going to work some super glue into that gap, because it's the tidiest way to make sure no glue accidentally comes through to the front, but it will lock it in place. I'm back at this job now 3 weeks after it was installed, and the customer's called me back because the light strips have started unsticking, which obviously isn't great when you're spending thousands of pounds on fitted furniture, but they've been quite nice and understanding about it. In fact, they said that it happened to a project they had in a previous house, so they didn't seem too shocked by it happening. It's never happened to me before. I think there are two reasons. One is I think went to excessive lengths to try and get the fit of these strips just perfect, so there was no gap either end, and actually they're a little bit on the tight side, so when I put them in, they were being forced to bow down a little bit because they went tight to each end, and I was pushing up against that bow to stick it, and the sticky tape just hasn't managed to hold against that tendency to want to spring back, which has probably got worse because of the heat when the log burner's been on. But I think the other reason is I don't think this tape that I've used this time is as good as the tape that I've used before. Now this is the tape we used this time, which is a Hayfully own branded double-sided tape. And I forget the width of that. I should have measured it really, maybe 15 millimeters, something like that. But what's nice about it is just a little bit less than the width of the aluminium profile. So it just sticks straight on and is hidden and does its job, or so I thought. The tape I've used before is this brand Taser, which I don't remember ever having problems with. And I think the adhesive is better, but also it's got about 1 millimeter or so thickness. It's a foam tape, which sometimes just seems to work better to really stick tight and take up any slight inconsistencies in the surface. So what I'm going to do, well, I'm going to try one, I think. I've taken the cover off already, and I'm gonna have to unplug it and take the electrics right out, and then I'll see how we go replacing with that other tape. Now this is definitely one of those jobs that's fraught with potential problems, one of them being the ease with which I could scrape the sprayed finish with these quite tight fitting ends. So I've bent that well out of the way and carefully moved it onto something soft. The other problem that I could have had was if I hadn't installed it with a view to being able to access things in future, it would have been a nightmare. But luckily experience has taught me that you need to make all connections accessible. So I could have had that inside there and the light strip running through, but I knew that would be unwise, so that is accessible. I just had to sort of unstick that, so I've got a bit of play, and then I can pull. I was able to unclip the cover, and I can then pull that out. The other thing we do is we don't secure that cable, which is an extension that goes from this one up to the other one. In the past we have cable clipped it onto the side, but actually that is hanging loose, which is good because then you've got the play to be able to pull it out and work with it if you need to. Well, I've been able to saw about 1 millimeter off with some care off the end of the aluminium, and I used these electrician's snips just to nibble off 1 millimeter or 2 off that as well, and that wasn't very prone to shattering, which I'd been concerned about. So that's good. They're both trimmed down. Now this is the original tape, which as you see is just a bit thinner, so it looks like that will peel off, and I'll see how I go now with the Taser tape. Well, I've stuck that on with the Taser tape, and it immediately just felt like a stronger grab as it made contact. And trying to just get my nails behind there and pull it is really rock solid. So I'm inclined to just give that a try, knowing that there's not the bending force now that I've cut them shorter. I think I won't go belt and braces and add a screw because of the possible issues with that. Of course, if the customer did call me back and needed it, I could go and spend that time on the revisit, but I don't anticipate that being necessary.